sex is fundamental ego identity, lived. And generally speaking, it is a problem for virtually everyone. And the seat of the patterning, or the domain of the patterning, that is life problems of all sorts. All that's a little bit deeper than that is the sheer life and death physicality problem. But in terms of the life manifestation, it's all about sexual patterning, emotional sexual patterning in the form of the social ego. Not just the genital activity patterning, but the personality patterning. The social pattern of self and other is founded upon the emotional sexual patterning to a very great degree, and animated through the whole context of emotional sexual consciousness. So it certainly is an important dimension of bondage, and therefore an important aspect of sadhana, this whole emotional sexual domain. But the perfect practice is not based on any reference to the body-mind or any method of the body-mind, and therefore it has nothing to do with sex inherently. And it's not that that the perfect practice is some kind of rule of disciplines that, there's a checklist, and among them is don't have sex. You see? But if there truly is the establishment of the perfect practice, what does it have to do with sex? What does it have to do with sexual bondage, ego I, other, difference, relatedness, psychophysical patterning, gross, subtle, and causal effort? What did it have to do with any of that? If the perfect practice is true and is profound, it has nothing to do with any of that. There is no method, then, of the body-mind that applies. It is the condition prior to the body-mind that is the domain of the perfect practice in this way. It is what could rightly be called the self-domain, or the domain of the self-condition. And that self-condition is not a self. The body-mind point of view carries with it some assumption that there is an I, a separate, identifiable, substantial person that may, in religious views, be described as a kind of something separate from the body-mind, something like a soul or entity of some kind that could be called spiritual, that survives death and so on. Whatever phenomena can be identified relative to the process after the physical lifetime, in any case, there is no separate, substantial self. The self-condition, or the capital S self, is not a self, it's not an entity. It is what could be described as nirvanic in nature, or in Buddhist terminology, a void, and so forth. It is not separate. It is not an entity. The self-condition of the body-mind is not a self. Well, that doesn't mean words like self or self-condition are not usable. Because if you can't make some kind of reference to that which is to be realized, or that which is ultimately realized when the body-mind is transcended, then you're left with nothing but perpetual meditation on the body-mind. So even Gautama is recorded to have said that there is an unborn and unformed, and so forth. If it weren't so, then those who are born, formed, and so forth couldn't have a way out of this. There's the general attitude of not describing it, of giving it metaphysical status and so forth. So the Buddhist tradition, especially in its Hinayana or Theravada form, doesn't make substantial references or metaphysical references to the self. It simply says everything is not self, and notice this, notice it, notice it, notice it, notice it, and eventually the whole identification with it, the passionate, craven identification with the body-mind is fallen off, blown out, you see. And that's nirvana, or realization. Well, what does that mean? Annihilation? No, we don't talk about negation, annihilation. No. There's a lot of quibbling over what words you're supposed to use then. It's anatman, the no atman, and those Vedantins, they say atman, but we say no atman. There's a real distinction being made, and there isn't. There is no distinction to be made if realization is the case. So it's possible for the language of self, capital S, or self-condition, and similar such terms, as I use them, it's possible to make use of such language, because that which is always already the case, no matter what arises, is always already the case. You don't have to call it anything. You can call it self, self-condition, nirvana, void, sunyata, whatever you want to call it or not call it. It's still the case. Always, already. And it inherently transcends the body-mind and has no causal connection to it.